The Sony ZV-E1 was just announced, and I'm a little bit conflicted about this camera. It's loaded with a lot of super cool features that are new that we haven't seen before, and it's got the same sensor as the Sony a7S III. But as I watched the announcement video from Sony of this camera, and watched a bunch of videos from trusted creators that I've grown to love over the years, I came to the conclusion that this camera is not right for me. In this video, I'm gonna share 8 reasons why I'm gonna pass on the Sony ZV-E1. Hi everyone, my name is Craig and I'm a film director and producer. Let's just dive right into these 8 reasons why I'm gonna pass on this camera. So number 1 is actually the biggest one for me, which is the overheating. Now, Gerald Undone did a bit of a review about the overheating problems of the Sony ZV-E1, and I was honestly pretty disappointed at what the Sony ZV-E1 had to offer as far as overheating and just long record times and the problems that it has in these different like long form video scenarios. So the main problem I see here is kind of the same problem that I had with a Sony a7 III back in the day, which is just the limitation of being able to record long form content. I was always concerned with the a7 III at the 30-minute record limit, and that every time around 30 minutes, I'd have to go reset the camera. And it was just weird in like a live production environment or a corporate interview setting. I'd have to pause my subject around 28 minutes and say, hey, sorry, I'm gonna have to pause you here so I can reset the cameras. That was always super strange. So for the Sony ZV-E1, my concern is as I move my workflow to 4K, if I'm in like a 73-degree environment, which is not even that hot, I have to be concerned about that hour mark. If I'm doing like a long interview or shooting a documentary and doing a long form interview with my subject, I have to be concerned about, is the camera going to overheat in 73 degrees? So I'm also someone who shoots weddings. So if I'm recording like a long wedding ceremony, that's outdoors in 85, 90-degree weather in the summer or 100+ degrees, I'd be super concerned about that even running for 20 minutes to capture a short ceremony, and some longer ceremonies are like an hour long. So I really need that camera to be able to record for an extended length of time. And this camera it doesn't look like it's able to do that very reliably. Not to say that if you were in more of a controlled studio environment that it couldn't get the job done, but it looks like even recording to an external monitor, you still have the same problem. The problem is the internal capacity to distribute heat, and it doesn't have like an internal fan like the Sony FX3 does. So you're just getting that problem of heat not being able to dissipate from the body, and it's just causing that sensor and that internal temperature to rise too high and forcing the camera to shut off, and you'll have to wait for it to cool down. That's just not my ideal workflow. So that's number 1, the overheating. Now, number 2 is just vlogging. Vlogging is not really on the rise right now. I actually just posted a video a few weeks ago about 3 video trends that are dead in 2023. And one of those on the list was the vlog. I've seen a lot of research lately about how YouTube specifically, and if you're trying to make it on YouTube, the vlog is not really the best format right now. And it's actually more of this idea of like long form video podcasting. Not to say that some channels, some vloggers aren't doing well still, but when Sony did their announcement of like, they showed all this B-roll footage of like people waking up in the morning and they have their camera set up there and oh, hey, now I'm walking around my house vlogging. Like that isn't really a repeatable, profitable model on YouTube as of late, at least. And who knows, that might pivot back at some point. But the whole Casey Neistat days on YouTube, that's not really where YouTube is gonna prioritize and strategize paying creators top dollar for vlogging. So this idea of like, oh, look at this great vlogging ZV-E1 camera, the vlog is kind of dead, so it doesn't appeal to me for that reason. Okay, 3 is the price point. Now, $2,200, it's competitive. It's not the best, it's not the worst, but when you think about where it sits in Sony's lineup, the Sony a7 IV is around $2,500, and you can get it used for sure for $2,200, if not less. So $2,000, I've seen them as low as $1,900 on Facebook Marketplace. So you really can get into that full frame lineup. Obviously the ZV-E1 is, but the Sony a7 IV is way better at photo capabilities. So it is that kind of hybrid style camera, and you get a viewfinder. So right around the same price point, you got the Sony a7 IV and the Sony a7S III that shares the sensor with the Sony ZV-E1 is $3,500, obviously, but I always see them for $3,000 or $2,900. That's like a $700-ish difference of getting the ZV-E1, or you can get the a7S III, which dissipates heat way better, doesn't have the problem with overheating, and that gets you that long form sort of recording time that you're looking for in this style of camera. You get the same sensor, but you get way better heat dissipation, which I think is super important. So the price point's at a weird point where you have some other options that you can look at for a similar price, and I'm just not sure the $2,200 is where this camera should be placed. I'd like it to be an even $2,000 or maybe closer to $1,850, and I'd be more intrigued to purchase that for what it's worth. Okay, number 4 is not having a full-size HDMI. This drives me crazy. And right now I'm filming on the A7S III and I have an HDMI cable running straight into my production monitor. You know what, let's record this. Right now I have an HDMI, full-size HDMI running straight into my production monitor. Now this is super essential for me because doing live production workflow or corporate workflow, I always have a monitor attached to my camera. It's just the best way to get a reliable, well-framed image. And I remember with the A7 III always having to convert that micro HDMI slot, had to convert that to full-size HDMI, and then sometimes even convert that HDMI to SDI, and then send the SDI signal into a production monitor. So this whole micro HDMI converter thing, I just don't want to go back to that. So I really like the ability to have a full-size HDMI, and the A7S III has that, the A1 has that, which I also own, the A7 IV has it, which I also own. So I just don't really like this idea of trying to go back to the micro HDMI workflow. So that's number 4. Okay, number 5 is having one card slot. Now, this isn't the biggest deal breaker for me. I often only am using that one card slot on my cameras that have 2 card slots, but for weddings and for just really important corporate work where I just do not like the idea of losing my files, this second card slot is super essential to have that redundancy and record to both card slots. And even if you don't have the redundancy backup turned on where you're recording to both card slots, I love the automatic overflow. So for weddings, if I'm shooting a wedding, recording, or even taking photos, I love the ability when one card maxes out, it just immediately goes to the next card and I don't have to worry about swapping out cards. I can usually get by with 2 256 gig cards in my camera, and then that's all I need for an entire wedding day. But if I only had one of those, I'm for sure guaranteed to have to like swap out SD cards, and I hate that idea. So having 2 card slots, it's super essential for me in my production workflow right now. Number 6 is not having an audio handle. And I know that you could attach the K3M audio handle that like you can with the A7S III, but the awkwardness is the placement of it. So the hot shoe is off to the left side of the camera, and so then you're gonna have the audio handle way over to the left and it's gonna be off balance. So I don't like that idea. So you don't have really a reliable XLR capability, so you're gonna have to go dual system. And the whole draw for this camera in the first place is it's kind of built like the FX3, and the FX3 has that amazing top handle that the FX30 also has, and I love those. My production team at my work, we use the FX3 and the FX30 a lot, and that top handle has just become such an essential part of that body. So I just don't like the idea of having a small form factor like that, but not having the audio handle attached. And number 7 is that form factor just is not great. I don't love the super compressed, the small body. Really, these Sony mirrorless cameras are about as small as I want to get. Now that I'm shooting on the FX6 pretty consistently, I love that form factor. It's just a little bit beefier. That heavier camera allows for those micro jitters to not come through as much when you're recording with these lenses that don't have like stabilization built in. So I've really gotten spoiled with like the FX3, the FX30, and the FX6. And even my rigged out A7S series and A7 IV series, when you rig those out, they're a little bit heavier, but I really don't like the idea of shrinking that even down more to like the A7C style, which now the ZV-E1 is in line with that kind of form factor, and it's just not my favorite form factor. So that's why I'm gonna pass on this body. And the 8th and final reason is not having a viewfinder. The reason why I put this number 8 is because it's not the biggest deal to me. I often am just using the LCD screen on the back of the camera. But when I'm shooting concerts, here's a little tip for you. When you're shooting concerts, you often aren't allowed to take video if you don't have a certain type of pass. So if you're just in the pit, you're limited to just photos. But if you're shooting through a viewfinder on a mirrorless camera, nobody knows if you're taking photos or videos. So you can kind of get away with shooting video through the viewfinder. Now, if you don't have a viewfinder, the only way you're going to be able to record is sticking your camera up in the air and looking at the LCD. And you might have a security team or one of their event staff come and ask you, what are you doing? Are you taking video or are you taking photos? And you're going to have to navigate that situation. But if everybody in the pit is just looking through the viewfinder, it's you can kind of get away with taking video. Not an endorsement from me though. And then just the practicality of on super bright days. I can't imagine the screen is super bright. So if the sun is shining directly on your monitor, you're going to want the ability to shoot through a viewfinder. So that's the 8th and final reason why I think I'm going to just go ahead and pass on the Sony ZV-E1. Now, don't get me wrong, I think this camera is super cool. And if I was earlier in my career and I didn't have some of these existing camera bodies that I work with right now, I'd be super intrigued by the quality of the sensor in such a small package. Like, I really don't know if there's a better full frame, small package Sony camera out right now besides that camera. So if you're thinking about getting it, you honestly probably should. But again, this is just my list of 8 reasons why I'm not gonna buy this camera. My opinion is not law. There's a lot of people who might have a differing perspective on this, but for where I'm at in my career, this just is not the right fit, not the right time to purchase this kind of camera right now. I'd rather save up more money, purchase more of a cinema style camera to get just the ergonomics the way I want them, the viewfinder, overheating, the heat dissipation I think is important. So it's just not the right camera. I'm gonna go ahead and pass on the Sony ZV-E1, but if I do get my hands on one, I'll let you know what it's like and do a review on this channel and let you know just image quality, what my experience would be, but I don't have plans to purchase it. So if there's someone out there who wants to let me use one, sure, go ahead, let me use it. I'll work with it and tell you what I think. But for now, you can expect content with my A7S III, my A1, Sony A7 IV, and then the cameras I use at work, more A7S IIIs, FX3s, FX30, and a couple FX6s. So you can just know that it's going to be the Sony world around here. Oh, also I have the Sony RX100 Mark VII, which I love that camera. So maybe I should do a review on that camera next. Maybe I will. Thanks so much, guys, for taking time to watch this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks so much. Much love.